was really our kind of debut. I mean, we kind of piddle around into what we call 5-axis type work, but this really got us into 5-axis machining. And most of you, if you're not familiar with 5-axis, your traditional machines really would be a vertical or a Bridgeport where the bed is flat and the bed moves, or the cutting tool comes down and moves. And then there's also the horizontal milling machine where you've got a big tombstone and then it spins around and then your cutting tool comes in from the side. When it gets to 5-axis, you've got a typically smaller parts, a little bit more intricate type part that's not going to just fit in a vise. It fits actually on a 5-axis pallet, and the pallet will spin and it moves like this or this way. So you're able to get all the intricate features on a machine that you wouldn't normally be able to do on a vertical or horizontal. Now, having said that, we use the term 5-axis, but I will here to tell you that probably 80% of the orders that we get for this type product does not go on 5-axis machines. The majority of ours, I would have to say, go on to a vertical machine like a Haas, and then they have an indexer mounted to the Haas machine. And then the indexer basically has a head on it, looks kind of like this, and it's kind of off to the side, and all of our items will bolt to it, and then the indexer spins while the cutting tool comes down and gets to the pieces. So we see that more than we do, quote, your true 5-axis. 5-axis is growing. There are a lot more of those machines out there now just because they've come down in price. Rather than $1 million, now they're $250,000. So you'll see a little bit more of them. But the 5-axis type products are limited as far as, you know, it's a little bit more intricate machines, a little bit smaller parts. So they're not nearly as common, though, as a vertical or horizontal. So anyway, so like I said, about coming up in 5 years, we got into the Raptor product. And the way the Raptor was developed, we had the company that developed it bought some Matsuura machines. And the Matsuura pallet that they bought basically was this size. So you have a horizontal machine basically with this size pallet, and they were kind of stumped as to what to put on it to hold their parts. Obviously, you can't put a big Kurt single station vise on here. So what they did is they came up with a block of material, and they cut a couple slits through it and put a screw through it, and then you could put your part on it and adjust the screw and hold your part. Well, over the years, they kind of made it a little better, and then what we ended up with is our first Raptor fixture, and you know it's the first one because it's an RWP 001. So this was the first one that they did, and you'll notice it's round, so it actually fits on the Matsuura pallet. So that's why you'll notice they're a round shape, not a square shape, but that's how that came to be. And then what they did is they actually put a dovetail type receiving spot on these fixtures. And what I mean by a dovetail is basically you're going to take your raw material, you're going to put this part now into a vise, and you're going to use a cutting tool, a dovetail cutter that we have, and it's going to put a little dovetail in it. And Nick, if you can show them what the dovetail kind of looks like.
Yep.
Basically, it looks like a dove's tail. And the reason you do the dovetail is because once it goes into, it fits neatly into this pocket. And then as you tighten the little clamps, they tighten around the dovetail fixture itself. And now what's nice about it is you get zero movement on your part now because it's gripping on that dovetail. But once you've got this in your machine, you'll notice you can access with your cutting tool. If you've got a cutting tool coming down out of your machine, I can actually do all 5 sides of this part. And the reason that's a big deal, because if I'm using this part and I'm putting it into a vise, and I've got to grip it here and machine the top, spin my table around and do this piece, then I got to flip it over and do this piece, flip it over and do here, flip it about 4 or 5 different ways to get my part done. So obviously you can see what you would have to do to get a part like this out of a typical vise application. But once I put my block of steel in our Raptor fixture, and I've done all my machining, and this fixture has moved in all different directions, when I'm done with it, it looks like this, and you undo it. And the only thing you got left on this piece is this little dovetail that was machined initially. So now all I have to do is either I can snap this off or put my part in another fixture and finish the bottom or cut the bottom off. So that basically is what the dovetail fixturing allows you to do. And the reason that's a big deal is obviously you're saving operations. The more operations you do on a part, the longer it's going to take, the more machine time it's going to take, or the more machine time it's going to sit. And nothing worse than the boss coming by and seeing the spindle not turning. In fact, we used to have a boss here. Every morning he'd go out in the shop and make sure the spindles were turning. If they weren't turning, he didn't want to know why they weren't moving. So even if they weren't cutting chips, you want to make sure they were spinning. And the reason that's a big deal too, because really machine time shop rates roughly $200 an hour just for that machine to sit idle. So as if it's not cutting chips, it's costing you about $200 an hour for one of those machines to sit idle. Now you may say, well, this is a small little vise. Do you do smaller pieces? Do you do larger pieces? And we have a wide variety of the dovetail sizes. Of course, I showed you this one here happens to be 1.5 inch dovetail. We go all the way down to our smallest one. If you'll see this, that's right at 1/4 inch. So that's the smallest dovetail that we have for small, delicate type pieces. This is used a lot in medical or dental type applications. Then we go to a 3/8 size. This happens to be a direct mount. You can actually mount this to a fixture if you want, but it's a 3/8 dovetail. This happens to be a longer dovetail, and its little sister is a little bit shorter dovetail, but they're direct mounts, as opposed to they don't have any dovetails on the bottom. So you can make your own fixture. If you wanted to put these in a dovetail fixture, we have attachments. This happens to be a 1/2 inch dovetail on the bottom of this, and then this gets bolted to it. And so now this makes this a dovetail fixture, which, since it has a 1/2 inch dovetail on the bottom, it now allows me to take my fixture like this that has a 1/2 inch dovetail in it, and I can pop it in. And now I just stacked up my part, so I can do a smaller piece with my bigger fixture still on the table. And so, which brings me to my other issue with this, is that we're very stackable. So just because I've got a riser on my machine, I've got a fixture, I don't have to tear all this down to do a smaller piece. I can now take another fixture that also has a dovetail on the bottom already, pop it in, and now I can do a smaller piece. I can do a longer piece if I want. This also has a dovetail on the bottom. And I've just changed out my entire fixture for 3 different parts in just a matter of a couple minutes. So now I'm back up and running again. And that's one thing that's unique about all of our risers. You notice we have different size risers here. They all have the Raptor mounting on it. So I can go from whatever riser I might need in my shop. It's all going to fixture to my Raptor fixtures. And you may be out there wanting to know, why in the world would I need a riser? Well, on a lot of these machines, the cutting tool, oh, there it is. The cutting tool on some of these machines can only come down so far. So if I'm way down on their bed of their machine, I can't reach it. So you need a riser up on the bed of the machine, and then you put your Raptor fixture on it, and now the cutting tool can get down and get your part. That's one advantage of using a riser. The other advantage on some machines, when you're using a riser like this, they found in the past that if you've mounted this to one of your 5-axis machines, and I was telling you the pallets spin, they rock, and they go forward and backwards. But when you go past 90 degrees, the part's way down here. Your cutting tool is up in a holder, and also a big head of the machine. When it comes down, the whole machine is going to hit the pallet that you've mounted this fixture to. So the riser we found is you've got different size risers like this that will mount to the pallet, and then you put your Raptor fixture on top of it. So now, once you're past 90 degrees, I'll do this without breaking everything, your part is sticking out far enough away from the tool holder and the actual head of the machine. I can now get to my part without crashing the spindle into the pallet. So those are the couple reasons that you would need a pallet. And now let's say, obviously I've only showed you doing one part at a time. One of the other features with Raptor is you're able to do more than one piece at a time. We have a couple items here that allow you to do 4 at a time. You'll notice this fixture, they're on 45-degree angles, and the sister fixture, they're on 90-degree angles. Both of these fixtures have an 1.5 inch dovetail already in the bottom. So what that allows me to do is, if I put this on my riser, I've got my dovetail fixture on the bottom of this. I can quickly adapt it now to do 4 parts. And again, I just changed out my fixture in a matter of a minute or two to be up and ready to go with a whole nother operation, a whole nother job.
So Scott, when you talk of the pyramid, that's what we have mentioned a couple times specifically to those. What exactly? How does that help people?
This has to do. You use a pyramid depending on the part you're doing. So this would go in. As you can see, this would go in on an angle, and this just allows you to machine the angles into your part. If you've got a strange angle and your machine table doesn't move enough to get those angles, you're able to put the part in here to come in. And now see if you'll notice if this cutting tool is coming straight down, you're doing a certain angles on this part that you wouldn't be able to do if it's mounted like this. Obviously, you're not going to hit the same angle, so they would need a 45 degree. Have we been asked about different degrees? We have, but we only have the 45 and the 90. Those are the popular ones. And one of the other multi-fixtures we have here is a direct mount. And what I mean by direct mount is it comes with a boss on the bottom, and it actually is a direct mount to the risers. So you can put it in that way. And this actually has 4 parts also that have a 1/2 inch dovetail on it. But what's unique about this one is this fixture here is actually this part, which actually has a 5C collet on it for your lathe. So this piece right here, you can actually directly mount it into your lathe and do lathe work, or it's mounted into this piece here to provide a different fixture. Now, there are other lathes out there, or indexers, I should say, that are called 5C indexers. Haas has a 5C indexer, which looks like your regular indexer, but it actually has a female thread on the end. And so none of these fixtures will thread onto that female, but this one will. It's got an adapter that's got a female thread inside. So I would go ahead and thread that onto my 5C indexer. And then this gets mounted into that. And I do have a YouTube video that shows this actually in action on a 5C indexer. Again, why would you do that? That definitely would be user specific. They just happen to have that indexer, and the part they need needs to spin very fast for them to be able to machine it. So that's what these items are for. And we also have an item in particular. A lot of these items were developed too for particular customer applications. So a customer went to Raptor and said, "Hey, I've got a particular machine. Could you make a riser for it?" So they did. That's how that developed. This long piece I was showing you, we had a medical company that came to us. They have got long parts, but when I put them in a smaller fixture, they have a tendency to rock or vibrate. So that's why we have the longer fixtures in the catalog as well. This one was designed by Gene Haas. You notice how short it is. We took the weight out of it so that it's on their little indexer, so it doesn't weigh down the indexer. He was afraid about how much weight could go on it. So this one is designed particularly for only one machine. It's got a real tiny boss on it. But it's also very low profile.
Hang on, was there a question out there?
Did somebody have a question?
Yeah.
Okay. And I was telling you the smallest fixture that we had was that 1/4 inch. This one right here is the biggest fixture that we have here on the table. This is actually a 2 1/4 fixture. You'll notice how big this one is and what size part you can use. This happens to be a fairly large part, obviously. Now, one of the questions we do get, obviously, you see here, and people say, "Well, I can only do a small part." What happens if I have a long part? The answer to that would be you stack these together on a table. We got a customer that's doing Hummer dashboards, and they use about 4 of these lined up in a row on their table. And they lay down a big block of aluminum, lock them in place with this fixture, and then they can machine all 5 sides of the dashboard however they want to. So just because they look like they only do small parts, there are options to do large parts. We actually had a customer up in Michigan that was using this one, and they must have had, I don't know, it was like a 40 by 60 inch piece of steel, and they would actually mount these individually to the bottom of the steel. And then this part here, they lay the steel down, and this part would be mounted to another fixture. But they wanted to use the dovetail, so they used a lot of these dovetail fixtures to do large parts. Now, as far as you guys are concerned, how in the world would you go out and be able to do that and go into a customer and suggest this? Typically, what we do is recommend basically you guys going out and bird dogging it for us, making sure a customer knows what's available out in the field by obviously promoting it, showing the catalog. Jeff's got a demo kit, and that's really the initial thing. If you got a guy looking at doing fixturing, hey, what are you guys looking at? We got a neat fixturing opportunity here. Let me have Jeff come in with the demo kit and show you how this works. Then the customer will say, well, I've got this machine I'm going to put it on, and that's where you can send that information to us. And then we can size the riser that they're going to need, the fixture they're going to need. We can actually get in touch with the customer if you want and go walk it through him with our engineer and make sure that we're getting the right product for them. So obviously some of the items that we do need, number one is what is this fixture stuff going to go on? What kind of part are they doing? What size part? Those are some of the questions we would ask initially to get up and going. One of the other questions we get, and you'll notice some of these look like they're in stainless steel. And we do have, most of our fixtures are available in both aluminum, which are blue or black, or stainless steel. So one of the questions we get a lot is, well, which one's which? Which one should I buy? And I'll tell you, the aluminum is about half the price of the stainless steel. So there is a cost reason for asking that question. But what I will tell you is if you use aluminum, we really only recommend using the aluminum fixtures with aluminum components. So if you're going to be machining Inconel or stainless or steel and you're really tearing up the material, we would recommend going with stainless. If you're just drilling and tapping or just machining aluminum, then the aluminum fixtures would be fine. And the reason I say that, because aluminum, if you're not doing it correctly or using the wrong application, the corners of these can tear or rip out or chip or what have you. One of the other questions really is how big a part goes in this? You know, I've got a fixture now. What's on my maximum? Well, if you go into the catalog under this part number, it'll tell you what the maximum size we recommend to go onto this fixture. So if somebody wants to know what the size is, the catalog will definitely tell you what the maximum size is. We get a lot of requests all the time. They're using this fixture, but they want to do a 12-inch part by 18 inches tall. Well, that's not what we recommend. So that's another reason to get us involved so we can kind of ask those questions and see what the guy's really doing. Let's see, the repeatability, that's another question we like to get, or we do get a lot. The guy wants to say, hey, I'm going to put my part in. What's the repeatability of putting a part on and off in my fixture? Well, the short answer is it doesn't repeat. It was never designed for that. These fixtures were designed to put a raw piece of material, machine it, and then take it off and you're done. It was never designed to take your part off, do something else with it, and then come back and put it back on this fixture and finish it out. So, you know, the short answer, like I said, is that it's not repeatable. It wasn't designed for that. However, what we have done, there's a locating pin in here, and it's a precision locating pin. It's within 0.5 thousandths. So if you really want to repeat, the downside to having a repeatable fixture is the customer has to do the dovetail. So this fixture only repeats as good as the customer can make his dovetail. So if he's sloppy at putting this little slot in the dovetail, then he's going to have a sloppy fixture. So when it comes to repeatability, we put in a half a thousandth repeatable locating pin, and now it's up to the customer to be able to adapt to that if he really has to have repeatability. And I did show you some dovetail cutters. We have a variety of dovetail cutters in the catalog, and they're different sizes because the height of these dovetails, when you machine your pocket on your dovetail and our fixtures, the majority of them are the same height. By the height, mean obviously the height of this dovetail. There are a couple of them though that are different, so you would have to size your dovetail cutter to make sure you have the right height for whatever fixture you're getting. And in the book, when you look up one of our fixtures, it recommends which dovetail cutter to use. We have coated and uncoated. They are carbide. They are a special dovetail cutter. And the reason they're special is because the way we make our dovetail, where's my big one? There, that'll work. You show them what the dovetail looks like. A standard dovetail would be come to a sharp point. Our dovetail cutters are designed to break the edges so you don't have a sharp point. And the reason you don't want a sharp point is if you have a sharp point going down into my fixture and seating down against this sharp corner, that is the least strong part of this clamp. And what can happen is it can start to rip this right off the fixture. So by breaking the edges, it actually rests against the top portion of this edge of this fixture. So you're going to get a much better hold, grip, and it's also going to make your part sit on the edges of your dovetail. So you're not going to get any rocking. So that's the other reason you do that.
So maybe we'll take just a second here. Is there questions, what you're seeing so far? Any questions?
Does everything make sense so far?
Oh, good job.
It does.
One of the other questions we also get is when you're using one of these fixtures is a guy has a small part, he has a too big a part. How much does your part have to sit on the dovetail? What do we recommend? We recommend that your part covers the top of the fixture. And I don't know if you can see this real well. I'll show you. The way that a part needs to seat properly on our fixture, you'll notice there's the clamps right here, and then there's a fixed piece here, and then there's a piece here on the middle. Your part, when you fixture it, needs to rest on this middle piece and this long piece. It has to sit squarely on that, and it needs to cover. The clamps have to engage in, obviously, the majority of the dovetail. So it needs to seat properly on top, and it also needs to cover enough so the dovetails can grip into it. So that's a big question we get a lot of. You'll notice I told you on our dovetail cutters, these are carbide and they're coated or uncoated. Another question is, do we have indexable inserts to do the dovetails? Some of our competitors do have indexable dovetail cutters. Those are standard, so you could use those on ours. However, they're going to be putting the point onto your fixture, which we do not want. So to answer that question, we do not have the indexable at this time. We just have the carbide cutters. One question that Nick had yesterday is the other question: when you're doing cutters, can they be reground? The short answer is they can be reground. We don't recommend regrinding them because the weak point is going to be this tip of your dovetail cutter. When you go to regrind it, number one, you're going to make your dovetail smaller. And so by making it smaller, it's not going to fit into the fixture right. It's not like regrinding an actual end mill. You may make the end mill diameter smaller, but it'll still cut like it's supposed to. This will not. And one of our other big questions too is about solid models. We get that all the time. I bet we get 4 or 5 emails a day where somebody wants a solid model of our items so they can put it into their CAD system and then size their parts. And absolutely they can. Most of them are available to be downloaded from the website. However, if any of your customers have an issue doing that, make sure you email me or Nick, and we can forward you the solid models for all of our parts. One of the other questions we get, probably once a week, we get somebody's wanting a special. Do we do specials? The answer is we do, and we have done specials. The big question is how many do they want and how much do they want to spend? Because if we're only doing one special, it's going to be awful expensive. However, if they're going to do 5, 10, or 15 pieces, obviously it's going to be less expensive. So we'll always look at something new, something different, something that we feel that would be a benefit, maybe even for us in the long run. Most of our specials, though, are on the riser side, not necessarily on the Raptor fixture. Basically on the riser, we get somebody wants a different size, different height, and so that we do take a look at, and we can do that as well. The last thing I want to talk about is 5-axis self-centering vices. And self-centering vise, most of you are familiar with the Kurt style vise, where you have a fixed jaw and then the front jaw moves back and forth. Our self-centering vise, now both jaws move at the same time, and they meet in the middle. So the question becomes, why would you need a self-centering vise? The reason you use self-centering vices is so that if I'm machining a round part, I put it in the vise, it's going to meet so that the center of my round part will be in the middle, which any vise can do that. However, now let's say I'm going to change diameters and get a bigger round piece, but I still want the center to be in the middle of the vise in the exact same location as this one. So if you use a Kurt style vise, obviously this is going to be on the far side. And then when I put in a smaller part, it's going to be not quite the exact same spot as it would as if you're using a self-centering vise. So basically it's self-centering or putting the center of whatever part you're doing in the same spot every time. This one happens to be a 4-inch model. We also have a 6-inch model. By that I mean the width. It's 4-inch wide by 6-inch, and then the other one's a 6-inch wide. We have the jaws on it that come with it, and they have a ridge in them that are tapped. And that's so that I can put inserts in it. Like I can do some Mighty Bite inserts, or I can do some parallel inserts. One's an 1/8, one's a 16th width parallel, and those just drop in, and then you lock them down with the set screws. These are also available in machinable jaws, so you can machine a pocket in there, do what you want, or they're reversible. And so that, another question we get with this one right here, do we have hydraulics or pneumatics? And at this point, we do not have hydraulics or pneumatics for the self-centering vise, or the Raptor fixtures for that matter. But hydraulics and pneumatics is a question that does come up a lot. So do we have any other questions?
That's good.
I'm good right now, just following along.
Okay, cool. Okay. Well, I mean, if there's that pretty much is you know, the I guess call it the gist of the training for the day today for Raptor. If there's specific questions, I mean, we're here. We'll leave it open a couple more minutes, but we appreciate your time. And if there's additional questions, you know, Jeff, Scott, myself, whomever, connect with us. We can get you whatever you might need. But you know, as far as that goes, is, you know, that concludes the training, and then any other questions that you might have.
Which is the vise that has the littlest or smallest amount of lift up?
Of lift?
You talking about on the Rafter or the vices themselves? You talking about this self-centering vise or the Raptor fixtures?
No, the vise.
This vise has lift. Comparatively speaking to any of our competitors, they all run about 3,000 to 4,000 in lift. There isn't one out there that's high above everybody else. They're all about the same with lift. And the reason that is because when you're putting 8,000 pounds of pressure on, when you're clamping on a vise like that, that pressure has to go somewhere. If anybody tells you they don't get any lift on their vise, I would venture to guess that they're wrong. Because that 8,000 pounds of force has to go someplace. Something has to move. So either the bed of the vise is moving, or the jaws are moving, or the center screw is moving a little bit. So about 3,000 to 4,000 is about what you're going to get on lift with ours and anybody else's for that matter. Now, some of them may.
Okay, one more question.
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I understand. Okay, and then I just have another question. I know that you guys have like soft chucks and stuff that people could, you know, mill, you know, to fit their parts. I got all that. But do you guys make special fixtures, you know, in-house?
We do not. We will make special jaws, but as far as you're talking about, like you building a fixture and putting clamps on it or whatever a customer might need to hold a particular part.
Yep, like cradle to the grave. They give you a part and you build a fixture for it.
The only way we do that is if we can utilize our existing parts, like our products. We have done that with like our, I don't know if you're familiar with our Toolex line of vices, our double station vices. We would have to be able to use those. We have to be able to use the Raptor components. We're not making special components or buying special components to make a special dedicated fixture for a customer. But what we have done is we built different jaws for different projects, put them on our vices, and then mounted the vices onto like maybe a rotary indexer with a base plate and done that. But as far as like a dedicated fixture with special clamps, that we don't do.
Hey, Scott, this is Jeff. And guys from JJ, I was just, one of the things I was going to offer you guys was, you know, we like to keep these pretty short and informative. The other half of the business would be like the Tico product. And we also have the Piranha Vise or Piranha Clamp. And I was thinking about, maybe we could do a 30-minute demo of that in a week or so, or whenever's convenient for you guys, John. And that would give you some better insight to the sort of full encompassing product that Tico offers to the market with all their products.
Yeah, that'd be fine. Why don't you send me an email later and we'll work out the details.
Okay. Yeah, let me talk with these guys and make sure that I'm sure Scott is good with presenting. But yeah, I'll send you that over.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I appreciate it.
And to jump on Jeff's point too, yeah, we are all, everything here is part of the Tico. Tico is our parent company. Tico is the nuts, bolts, and washers and clamping kits that everybody's been familiar with since 1926. So, and as Jeff said, Raptor is one part of it. Our Toolex Vise is another part, and then and Piranha is another work holding section of Tico, separate from just the nuts, bolts, and washers. So, and we are doing the separate. We are doing the separate webinars by product category too. We're going to be, we can do one just on the Piranha, just on Toolex, the Vises, and then obviously the one on Raptor.
All right, let me ask you one more question.
Yeah.
I know another segment of your business is called Piranha, and I just have a question about it. When would you suggest we push the Raptor over the Piranha or the Piranha over the Raptor? What are you looking for in a job, in a particular customer's, product line, let's say, where you go, yeah, the Raptor is best here or the Piranha is best?
The biggest thing with Raptor is you have to be able to prep your part. A customer, the first thing I always lead with Piranha or Raptor, because number one, because I'm the most familiar with this. It's out there a lot more. Most people know, and the dovetail issue of putting a dovetail on a part is nothing new. Machinists out in the field have been doing dovetails on parts for a long time, so they're familiar with dovetails. So I always lead, first of all, I say, hey, are you willing to prep your workpiece to put a dovetail on it? A lot of customers get their castings in as cast, so they can't put a dovetail in it because it's coming in already. If it's coming in already like this and they don't have room to put a dovetail on it, then they can't use Raptor. In that case, then I go, okay, then what are you looking for? What kind of machine is it going on? Is it going to be a big vertical, a big horizontal, or is it going to be something, a smaller application that we can use Raptor or Piranha on anyway? So then we go from there, and the guy then shows you what he's doing. And with Piranha is basically a machinable jaw vise, and Nick will show you what the vise itself looks like. This one is what we call the snapper, and it's got serrated jaws on it. So obviously, if you're going to put a part in there, you got to be able to. It's got to be a first stop or a casting. And then on the Piranha side, we also have locating studs on the bottom, and these locating studs fit into a plate that gets mounted to the machine. And so then the vise itself goes into the receivers, and then you lock it down with a bondage wrench, locks it into place. So what that allows you to do, though, is pop it off and put another fixture in it. And what I was telling you about the machinable jaw, yeah, I'll do the other one. This is the one that's actually got machinable jaws on it. And so you can machine your pocket, put a part in it, or whatever the customer is looking to do, and then these machinable jaws come off, and you can get steel or large tall jaws, or you can put little parallels in them as well. They also have the 0 point. So basically the flexibility of 0 point is really using mini vices. So if the guy's really more looking at just a smaller version, a smaller vise, versus our Toolex siding, which is the bigger vices for bigger parts, then the Piranha might be a good avenue for them to go, especially if they're wanting to change out fixtures. A lot of times with our vices, or like Kurt vices, our vices, once they're on a machine, they stay there forever. This is really more designed to be a modular system. So if a guy is going to, for my one job, I can't put a dovetail on it, but I do need to hold it in a smaller vise, but I may have several different options that I want to do without having to change out my plate. So that's where Piranha would come in. Because one thing I didn't touch on, when you buy the Raptor fixtures, They do come with 4 tapped holes on the bottom, and these 4 tapped holes are 4 locating studs that they go into the bottom of your Raptor fixture, and now that allows you to adapt to a customer
On the 0 point.
on the 0 point. So just because he bought Piranha and bought 0 point doesn't mean sometime down the road he might want to use dovetail fixturing, and he can use our dovetail fixtures.
Mm-hmm.
Or we can go the other way. This plate I'm showing you here actually was designed with a Rafter mounting on the bottom. So if a guy has all Rafter fixtures and now he's looking to go into a little small vise, he can buy this adapter fixture, and it goes right onto his Rafter riser. And now he can use the 0 point Piranha system without having to buy a whole nother thing of risers. And and if you do that, and the other thing out in the field, if you got questions, the guy's not sure about it, get him on the phone with us. We can do this for him also. It doesn't have to be just for distributors. We can do this with the end user so they can see all the different parts, but we can get him on the phone and kind of feel him out and ask him some more questions that we may have another customer doing the exact same thing he is, and we can suggest some other alternatives.
Mm-hmm.
I like how the 2 systems are interchangeable.
I'm sorry?
I like how the 2 systems work with one another.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, big benefit.
That's also, I think it's very interesting that, like, if a customer is confused about what they need, and we can put on this, you can like bring out all these parts and kind of show him, and he can kind of see, what you're talking about before, we bring it in and it's all wrong. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And one thing I'll tell you, you were talking about jaw lift. One thing that the dovetail fixtures have is you get 0 jaw lift, no jaw lift with a Raptor fixture. So if a guy's really worried about it and he can put a dovetail on his part, then Raptor would be the way to go, because that part's not going anywhere.
Right. Hey, Scott, this is Jeff again.
Yeah.
And John, just speaking to kind of what we've been talking about, in my experience with this, some places love the idea of the fixturing and stuff, but they're just not quite sold on the process of putting a dovetail on for whatever reasons. There's multiple reasons, and they just don't want to do it. So a lot of times, in that case, that dictates that you obviously got to get away from the Raptor, because they don't want to do a dovetail, and you got to go to a self-centering vise. And I don't want to steal thunder from any other presentations, but one of the cool little features is the Piranha Vise is coming out, or Piranha Clamp has come out with a 75 millimeter vise.
One behind it.
This one here.
Yep.
And again, I don't mean to steal.
You're stealing
thunder,
Jeff.
But
What Jeff was talking about is this one right here.
Yeah.
You see how small it is?
That's just
25 millimeters.
Right. So if they want to get that in a small envelope on a pallet, or do a multi-fixturing, this is our solution. And it's a nice, and I really do want him to go over in a separate call the Piranha Clamp, because it's a really high quality vise. It rides on the rails. It has extremely high holding capabilities with very minimal lift. John, you have some experience with it, of course, at Micro Insert. We dealt with it, but it's a good system, and it's a good alternative to somebody.
I'll tell you why he really liked that more than the competition is not because there wasn't lift, but it was because the lift was exactly the same every single time. So his offset was consistent, and that was not the case with any other vise he had used.
Right. Okay, that's great. That's great info.
And John, one thing I'll tell you,
Yeah,
I think that was one of the customers that we did a FaceTime with, because we wanted to see what he was doing, and so we got on the phone with him, and he had his phone, or I think Chris did at the time, and we were actually he was showing us the setup he had, how he was doing it. Was he doing something right? Was he doing something wrong? And we were able to talk him through it, and we did a lot of testing here on stuff to help him realize, that what he had was a much better mousetrap.
Yeah,
I think he was actually
really
doing
likes
some parallels in his also.
Yeah, he really likes it.
Cool. Good. All right. So any other last questions here?
Actually, we have to kind of get moving.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I just said we have to jump on another meeting shortly. So Chuck and Austin, if you have questions, please ask now.
I'm good.
Well, great, guys.
Okay.
Excellent. Well, thank you for the
Thank
time
you.
today. Any questions, please feel free to connect with us. Thank you.
We're here Monday through Friday.
Nice job, guys. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.